Okay, hi everyone. This is going to be a supplementary lesson for economics. This content isn't actually in the higher economics course, but it is important to what generally you should know about economics and particularly about how it relates to politics. Um, I've mentioned a few times that politics is related to economics, and it's quite difficult to decouple the two. But with this lesson, I'll attempt to do that and show you how politics is related to it and how politics shapes economics. So, first thing I want to do actually is cover something called the political compass. So, there's a website I've got here called the political compass. Um, Similar in ways to how people will create their own politics. You you begin to decide your own economics. So the political compass, a lot of people consider themselves that it's either left or right when you consider politics and economics. You're either left wing or you're either right wing. Um, Really, that's a bit of a simplistic choice. It's not too. It's not very detailed about what the world is actually like. Um, it's better to call it a compass because there are different places on the political compass that you can sit. You can be left wing, but you can also be authoritarian. You can be left wing but libertarian. You can be right wing authoritarian, right wing libertarian. So the way the political compass works is the two axes is the y-axis going up and down. That's the social scale, so it goes from the top of it being authoritarian and the bottom being libertarian. And then on the x-axis is the economic scale, the one going from left to right. And you could there's four sections in the compass. Authoritarian left, which is when you combine the top part of the y-axis and the leftmost part of the x-axis. Authoritarian right, again that's top of the y and right on the x. Libertarian left, so down on the y and left on the x, and libertarian right, down on the y and right on the x-axis. So these are all different sections, and most political and economic decisions you can place around this compass. So this website, luckily they give you a rough guide of where famous figures in history sit on this compass. So if I just scroll down, you see there's a few people here. So authoritarian, libertarian, you can see I'll choose the three that are up at the top. So we've got Hitler, Stalin and Thatcher up at the top for the authoritarian scale. So Hitler being right up at the top on the authoritarian scale. The Nazi government during the Second World War in Germany was a very authoritarian government, but that a lot of that were social policies put forward by the Nazi Party. As an economic front, the Nazi Party favoured very large state control of sectors. They ramped up military production massively in Germany, and it was all government initiatives that done that. So it's why Hitler probably sits in this section between left and right on the economic scale versus right up at the top for the authoritarian scale. If we go over here, we've got Stalin. Now, obviously, Stalin was the head of the Soviet Union, which was a communist state, so it was very authoritarian. So he's right up at the top for authoritarian, but he's also right over to the left for economics because the Soviet Union was a communist society. Pretty much everything was state owned, state planned, and run by the government. So it was massively over on the left and also up in the top for authoritarian. And then if you take the last one, Thatcher, so leader of the Conservatives from 1979 to 1990, if I remember correctly. She was fairly authoritarian, but not quite as much, and she was more over to the right, favouring free markets over state control of certain parts of the economy. So always try and think of someone as being on these points on both axes. They're on both axes between the economic axis and the social axis. You can't really say that they're just left wing or just right wing. It's a bit simplistic to say that. So I just truck going past it. And then the last two, Mahatma Gandhi down here, so a famous leader from India. He is fairly over on the left down here, which meant he would have favoured more state control of certain services, and he was also more libertarian, so down the way on the social scale, meaning that he would be more open to social change, more open to different ways of thinking about society, and as a great leader of change, he would have been on that scale. That is quite true. Last one, you might not have heard of this guy. This is Milton Friedman. He was a famous economist. He developed the Chicago School of Economics, which was still is quite a free market way of thinking about economics, but also quite a liberal way of thinking about economics. He favoured legalising a very wide range of different things that governments probably wouldn't consider if they were in power. He favoured liberalising markets to a great extent. So he was on the right economically, but also down a bit on the social scale. So it's why it's not quite right to say someone's just right wing, because if you're saying the right wing, you're talking about their economics primarily. You're not really talking about their politics. It's why it's difficult to separate the two. You always need to try and consider where do they sit on the compass rather than just on the left or right axis. To call someone left or right, again, it's most people will know what you mean, but it's just a bit simplistic to say. You need to be a bit more specific. Now, again, just to elaborate on that, this isn't in the higher course. This isn't really part of what's taught in the SQA course. I really just want to add this on as a supplementary part, because I feel like people should know this. When you study economics, the topic of politics will come up, but you should understand that the full extent where it's a compass rather than just a line of left and right. Okay, so there's a lot of information on this website I'm not going to go into because it is more to do with politics, and while we're teaching economics, we're not teaching a politics course. I'll go into it if you want me to, but not primarily what we're doing. I would probably recommend that if you're interested in this and interested in where you use it, you can actually do the test for this. So the website's called www.politicalcompass.org/ for the test part is /test, and that's got all the information. You can fill in this test, and it's quite a long test, I will say, so maybe allocate maybe 15-20 minutes to do it. And some of the questions, they can be a wee bit tricky. If you've got any questions, you'll feel free to ask. It's absolutely no problem. But for example, just to quickly go through it, I won't go through the full test because it will take far too long to do in a video, but I'll just do the first question and just explain how you would do one of these questions. So it says, if economic globalisation is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the
auto shutdown initiated.
Sorry, that's my headset turning off. It should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So that's wanting to create a question about do you value the betterment of society as a whole, or do you think that corporations will benefit society generally? Because on the more right of the economic argument, people might argue that corporations, because they make money and invest in services to a certain extent, and they employ people, that they do generate cash in that society. It depends on where you sit. So if you agree with that statement, you would say agree or strongly agree if you really believe in it, or if you don't, you would say disagree or strongly disagree.
Powering off.
Obviously don't. So generally that's how you'd answer these questions. There's one question that I'll quickly touch on, because often, you need to fill in the questions to go on. There's one question that talks about protectionism later on in the test. Protectionism is if a country wants to protect its own industries in its economy. So an example I would probably cite here would be French farming. French farming was a protected, or still is a protected industry in the EU, because French farmers during the 1970s, during the 1980s, they weren't making very much of a profit, and they were being beaten by competition from abroad. What the French government done was they put in policies to protect their farmers. They set price controls on how much the farmers could sell for, how much imports would cost, and by doing that they are bringing in protectionism. So in a completely free market society, those French farmers probably would have went out of business because they couldn't make enough profit to run their business. But the French government bringing in that protectionism policy meant that the French farmers could still exist with those policies in place. So really that's about it. That's all I wanted to touch on just now. Again, I would probably recommend you do this test if you want to find out about your politics, and that it is quite accurate. The reason it's quite accurate is because there are 6 pages of questions, and they do go into quite a bit of detail. So I'm just going to quickly touch on this before I finish the video. The Political Compass also gives you a breakdown of how all the different elections went forward. So here's all the elections tab. I'll pick up the one from the general election 2019. I'll pick up 2017 actually, and the EU referendum, and I'll also do the presidential election from 2016 in the USA. So just quickly to cover this, here's the 2019 general election. So you can see the parties up here. So these are right-wing authoritarian governments, or parties. You've got the Conservative Party, the Brexit Party, the UKIP Party, DUP, Lib Dems down here, and then over on the left and more libertarian side, the Plaid Cymru, the SNP, the SDLP also I think are in exactly the same circle, that's why you can't see them. Labour over here, and the Green Party down here. So you can see how that breaks down for 2019. On 2017, that's a wee bit smaller, and you can see on the authoritarian libertarian scale there's a wee bit of change. So the SNP were actually a bit more up in 2017 on the authoritarian scale. The Scottish Socialist Party, they're not on here, don't think so. And the SDLP still there, Plaid Cymru, Labour, Green, Lib Dems, Conservative, UKIP, DUP, they've not changed too much. EU referendum, right, I won't go into that one. You can probably read about that one yourself if you want. And the US presidential elections, you can see the winner, Donald Trump, was up here, the authoritarian right wing. Hillary Clinton, so I mean, you could say Hillary Clinton was even more right wing than Donald Trump. She was actually on the economic scale more to the right than Donald Trump, but less authoritarian. Gary Johnson, I believe, was the Libertarian candidate. He was obviously down in the Libertarian scale, but also very over to the right. And Jill Stein, I think, was the Green candidate, if I remember correctly. And she's down in the Libertarian scale, but over on the left, over here. And that's it. The bin lorry's outside, so I'll leave the video there. Thanks for listening. I'm going to be covering another one on schools of economic thought just after this. So thanks for listening and take care.